is your Pan-African show called Afreeቃ with your host Qetselaworq seifu. Today we have moved from our normal settings and we've come to this beautiful space. And I know she doesn't need any introductions, but I would allow her to introduce herself. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for wanting to interview us and interview me and to come out here to our beautiful location here in Getaneh, where we run our little fashion company, our integrated fashion company. I've been operational here pretty much when I started work here in Ethiopia. My name is Getaneh, and I'm the founder, the creative director, and wear different hats. But yeah, I pretty much run this company with a wonderful team, and this is my day job. I also have wear different hats. I also run a non-profit, the ECF Children's Fund, which has been running now for over 2 decades. So that's really my pride and joy. And yeah, and I do a couple of things here and there. I still try to keep my international work a bit alive. So, but I'm pretty much firmly based in Ethiopia and running this company. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, you know, what makes you a little bit different is the fact that you were born abroad. So if you could tell us a little bit about that experience. You know, you went to school there. You basically grew up there. You came back home as an adult.
We did move back between 8 and 12, so those were very difficult years. But yeah, I was born abroad. I lived most of my life outside Ethiopia, but I've always felt very Ethiopian. I mean, there was never a question about it, you know. And I think, you know, I give a lot of the credit to my parents. Both my parents, my mother and my father, knew that if they were going to bring up children abroad, that they have to make sure that from the early ages that we really know our identity. So speaking Amharic, learning how to read and write, learning how to make, you know, dorowet. You know, I'm not an expert, but, you know, I've learned all of that. And I really thank my parents, you know, because now moving back to Ethiopia, if I wasn't, you know, able to understand the culture and the language and be able to communicate, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today. I mean, it would have been very, very difficult. So, but I was never really exposed to anything in the sense, you know, Ethiopian family, very protective. My parents were very protective. So even though we traveled to many countries, and I lived in about 8 countries before I finished high school, I never really felt sort of like an outsider, because home was where we were in the house, you know, the family and being together. And we spoke Amharic as much as we can. Whenever we found like Ethiopian, if there was an Ethiopian Orthodox church, or if there was a Greek Orthodox church, or Russian, my mother always found, you know, a church that we can go to. Obviously with the Ethiopian community, you know, either the embassy or, you know, so there was always ways of, you know, linking and finding parts of our culture, you know. So by the time I moved here, I don't want to say it was easy, but I knew a lot of things about the culture. So it wasn't like I had any culture shock. So
beautiful,
the
beautiful.
transition was good.
So of course I have to ask you, now you grew up in Sweden. So therefore it'd be interesting to know how should I say, trying to be very diplomatic here in the wordings, you know, being an African child, how were you accepted or treated? Or were you treated any differently?
Well, I lived in Sweden only the first 4 years of my life, and then we moved to different countries after. And in between, we also lived in West Africa. So I was quite exposed, and I never really felt any kind of direct, if it's racism or, you know, any kind of direct. And I think it's, once again, the way my parents brought me up. And, you know, I mean, there was no question, especially my father was like, you know, we come from the most beautiful country. There's, you know, yes, we lack certain opportunities and certain, you know, resources, but we still have the most incredible country in the world. So for me, it was never a question. But yes, as I became a teenager, I kind of wanted to affirm a little bit my Africanness. So obviously the way I was dressing, and I chose to wear like more African print clothing, etc. Because I kind of wanted to do my part and start really, you know, but I never really faced anything direct. Okay. But I was always aware of it, and I always asked questions, because sometimes like you'd watch TV and you would watch only negative things coming out of Africa, and especially Ethiopia. Obviously the famine and the turmoil there was at that time. But, and then I would ask a lot of questions. I would say, well, at home, you're telling us we have this incredible country, but, you know, what are we watching on TV? And, you know, the kids at school sometimes, you know, could be a little bit, you know, and I was pretty skinny and tall. So like, oh, Anna, do you have your school lunch? Oh, do you want, you know, like it was a little bit of that at some point. So, and I didn't eat because I like to play, and I you know, I just never had time to eat my lunch. But I never really, it was never really an issue. It was always like, okay, you know, my parents would always say, yes, we have problems. And yes, not just in Ethiopia, but in the rest of Africa. But it's sort of like everybody has to do their part, you know. When you grow up, you should really think about doing things in your country. So that was implanted very early on in my mind about, yes, we have this incredible resources, but there's just so much we have to do, and we have to play our part, you know. So, but I was lucky. And I think even when I got into fashion, I was pretty protected. So I wasn't exposed, but I was aware of it because, you know, you have friends, you understand the reality. And so that I was aware of it, but I never really felt it directly. I was lucky.
You were lucky, yes.
Maybe, yeah.
So now we come to, obviously, the modeling. So I would like to ask you if you could take us through your journey into becoming an international model. I know you probably didn't get up one day and say, okay, I'm going to do modeling today.
Almost like that. Almost like that. I mean, I want to say I don't have any fancy story where I was discovered, you know, somewhere in Africa, you know, with, I don't know. I literally was living in Europe at the time. We were in Brussels. And a lot of my friends in high school would say, you know, why don't you get into modeling? And of course, for me, it was never, I never ever thought about it. I mean, as odd it may seem. And back in the days, you know, you don't, it's not like now where fashion is like everywhere, you know. It was sort of like, for me, it was like I go to college, I learn one of 5 things, you know, and then I get married and that's life. You know what I mean? That was really kind of the way I was brought up. And I was thinking, so my friends are like, you need to get into modeling, you need to try it out. And so that's kind of where I started. And I went to an agency in Brussels, and I just knocked on the door. I said, listen, you know, I want to do this work, whatever it is. I don't have a certificate. I don't know what it is, but, you know, apparently you don't need a lot of background. You just, you know, you could do. So that's kind of how I started. It was kind of like a joke. I mean, not really a joke, but, you know, obviously I was interested to learn more about it. And then I started hearing from the other girls, like, if you go to Paris, it's only 2 hours train. If you go to Paris, it's like the center of fashion. And, you know, so I started thinking about Paris. But it was like, the big thing was like, how am I going to tell my parents? Like, I didn't know how I was going to tell them. You know, it's like, they work so hard, they bring you up, and then what am I going to tell them? You know, like, you know, I'm 1 year to graduating from high school, and so it was tough. So I didn't tell them anything. So I finished high school, I got into college, I didn't say anything, but I was working a little bit. And then when I went to Paris and I started seeing the opportunities there, I started sort of telling my mother first. And then she was like, oh, I don't know how we're going to tell your dad. You know, it was like, let's just, you know, are you serious about it? I said, I don't know, but I want to, you know, I don't want to hide and do it, you know. So that's kind of how I started. But long story short, I finally made it to Paris. I was lucky. It was at a time where Paris was opening up the fashion industry, and they were looking for different girls, you know, because prior to that, so when the 1990s came, it was like, people were like tired of one kind of look, you know? So they wanted girls from different parts of the world, you know? So, you know, I happened to be there at that time, and, you know, they're like, yeah, you can work. And I was like, can you teach me how to do this? I don't know how to, you know, walk. I don't know. They're like, no, it's fine, you know? Literally, I just like, in 1 week I was doing, you know, Saint Laurent, I was doing really big shows, and it was quite stressful, because I had no idea. Like, I would watch the other girls, and I'd say, okay, you know, I hope I don't fall, I don't, you know, and then you'd go home and practice, and then, yeah, so then I got into it, and then from Paris, I finished university, and then from Paris, I moved to New York, and that was where, obviously, the biggest market was, so I was really lucky. I was with Ford Modeling Agency, which was one of the best agencies at that time, so I started working with Ford. And then I went international, so I started getting agencies in different countries and everything, yeah. So the rest is, I don't know, as they say, history, but it was 10 years. I was supposed to have done it one summer, and I was supposed to go back, and, you know, I studied marketing. So I was gonna do languages, and, you know, I don't know, I was gonna work for an art foundation. I mean, I had few plans of what I wanted to do with my life, but then this opened up doors, you know? And I just thought, there's a reason why I am doing this, and I need to kind of bring this into what makes sense for me. So that's where I started.
Beautiful.
The other work.
So what did you like or not like about the modeling industry? Because we hear so many.
Good question, yeah.
So many things.
So what I liked about it, it's been really good for me because obviously, you know, when I started modeling, I had a good foundation. I had my family. I pretty much finished university by the time I got into New York. So it wasn't like life and death, kind of like I had to do this, and if it doesn't work, I have nothing else, you know? And sometimes you have very young girls who come who are so vulnerable, you know, they enter the industry and it's sort of like, this is all I can do, you know, it has to work, and they're willing to do anything for that, you know? And that's when it gets really tricky. And for me, it was like, I'm doing this kind of work, I will never do this kind of work, and this is what I do, and this is how I kind of told my managers, my agents. And so pretty much, you know, I was lucky to find agents who believed in me. So it was very positive. I got to travel. I mean, obviously I traveled growing up, but traveling on your own and just, you know, beautiful hotels and, you know, and just working with great designers. And it was just really, it was a great time. And when you're young and you're in New York and you're single and you can do whatever you want, it's just a beautiful, I was very, very lucky. Now the negative part is you have to accept rejection, you know, and sometimes, you know, you might have a client that likes you, but then, you know, they'll tell you just, oh, you know, she's too fat, or she's too whatever, or we don't want any black girls, or she has, you know, there's always things that people would say that, you know, that could hurt you, you know, because you're young and you know, and so it could be very, very difficult if you're a vulnerable, fragile young lady and, you know, working in the industry. Obviously I was lucky enough to work with good agents. There are also not so good agents. So, you know, and there are a lot of things. But overall, like anything in life, if you have an opportunity, there's always the good and bad. And you know, you just have to always be focused, you know, surround yourself with people that support you, give you advice. And yeah, so I was lucky enough to not only be there at the right time during that period where black models, girls from Brazil, from the Caribbean, from, you know, Africa were coming into the scene for the first time. I mean, 10%. I mean, it's not like, you know, it's just one token here, but it was better than having no blacks in the industry. Exactly. No, it wasn't like, you know, a lot of opportunities, but it was enough. And new markets like Japan, new markets like, Milano, UK, and of course, Paris being the big markets, but, you know, even markets like Spain and Germany and Tokyo, we're kind of opening up for this different look because they follow what's happening in the trends. So I was able to travel a lot. I mean, I don't know, every 2 weeks I was in a different country. So literally I lived from suitcase to suitcase to suitcase. So my extra room in my little apartment was like suitcases. So I had like suitcase, winter country, summer, you know, whatever. And it was just, you just had to get into that thing because, you know, you only have that window.
Exactly.
And when you start off, it's like, you would say 5 years if you're lucky. You know, by the time you hit 25, 26, you're too old. So you're thinking, oh my God, I better work as much, you know? But, you know, I ended up working for 10 years. And I stopped when I wanted to stop because I wanted to have a family. I wanted to, you know? But at the beginning, it's sort of like, you know, everybody's telling you things that put pressure on you because it's all about youth, it's all about looks, it's all about, you know, and then you don't have time to prepare the next step, you know? So good and bad, but, you know, when I advise younger models, I always say, you know, have a plan B, just have something to fall back on, and, you know, just go with what makes sense for you. And it might not make sense for everybody else, but as long as, you know, it makes sense for you, then at the end of the day, you have nobody to blame. You know, you could just kind of rethink things, realign, and, you know, and hopefully learn from the whatever experience, you know, you've had and everything.
So now I'm going to take you to the humanitarian side of you. Okay. When or how did you get into the humanitarian services? When did it become like a passion?
Especially my sort of mid-teens, late teens, I started really questioning this thing about, you know, not necessarily identity, but it's sort of like, why do we have these two different stories of Ethiopia, of Africa, you know, sort of what we see on the media, what we hear from other people, and, you know, what the family's telling me, or other Ethiopians are telling me, and it's like, we are the best, and we have this, and, you know. So I grew up with questioning mainly myself, but also my parents. So I've always known whatever I do, it has to involve coming back and doing something. You know, I didn't know what it was, because I had no money. I mean, I was in high school. I didn't know. I thought maybe I have to go to school, make some money, like that kind of thing, But because it was always there, when I started modeling, within 6 months, I wanted to work and I wanted to come back to Ethiopia. So at that time, I had heard about Pharmacists Sans Frontières, PSF. It is a Pharmacists Without Borders. So they were raising funds for refugees in East Africa. And it was focused in Moyale, in Kenya. So there's Moyale, Ethiopia, Moyale, Kenya. And they were raising funds. And by chance, they approached my agency because they needed people to talk about from that area to talk about. So they approached 2 other girls who were a lot more advanced than I was, meaning visibility and who'd been in the industry, and they both declined. So of course I was like, perfect. So when they told me, do you want to get involved? I said, absolutely. So that's how it kind of started. So one thing I refused to do was I said I was not going to go on TV and talk about that because everybody else is doing it. I said, if I get involved, I want to do the most beautiful art show in Paris and bring in Ethiopian artists. And then once we raise the money, I'm going to come with you and then make sure that I follow through on that. So, and my agent's like, they're not going to allow this. I'm like, it's you don't have a name. You're not going to just go on TV and talk about art show. I said, I'm not going to do it. So that's how it started. And to my surprise, they said, okay. They said, maybe that's a good approach. Let's show a positive side of Africa, a positive side of Ethiopia, but still raise what we need to raise. And then, so that's kind of how it started. And I became very good friends with Pharmacists Without Borders. They advised me a lot. So we did this beautiful exhibition in Paris, and we brought 5 of Ethiopia's leading artists. So Iskender Bogasa, I'm sure you know him, the late Iskender Bogasa, Girmay Hiwat, Yohannes Gadamu, Mikhail Beteselase, and these are leading Ethiopian. So it was pretty much a phone call, and I said, I'm trying to organize the most beautiful Ethiopian art show in Paris. Could you guys come? Figure out how you're shipping your stuff, figure out your plane ticket, figure out your hotel, everything. But I just want to do a beautiful art show. We raised money, and then they kept their promise, and they took me to Moyale. So I took time off from work, and I went to Moyale. And I spent a week there, and of course I wasn't prepared. So it was like the event and I was just running around. I had to do my work in Paris, and then all of a sudden I'm on a plane with these guys like working, getting ready for this mission, and there was me, okay? So that was an interesting experience, but I think that was when I decided finally that there was no turning back, and I was gonna really commit to what I had experienced there. And I spent a lot of time, I spent the whole week, but a whole week was like a lot. For me, I was put into an area where they were feeding young kids, like tiny kids. So there were doctors who knew what they were doing. There were journalists who knew what they were doing. Everybody knew what they were doing. And then there was me, sort of like, so I tried to fit in, and I tried to just, understand and say, okay, what am I going to do with all this information, So I went back to New York, and then I started the Ethiopian Children's Fund.
When and how did you start the Children's
Foundation?
Fund? Yes.
So I went back to New York, and then I called my lord. I said, I want to start a foundation for children. He's like, okay, wait, hold on. What's happening? I said, I'm going to start a foundation. I said, what do I need to do? Because I think, I need to raise money. I want to help this camp. I want to help this. And so that's, I started that. I got a few of my close friends at that time to join my board, and that was it, And next year we're celebrating 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good.
Next year we're celebrating 25 years since we started the school.
Good job.
So yeah, so I was raising money, I was coming here, I was working with existing organizations, and then I decided I really want to open my own school. I want to have a school where we can have kids who can just, be from different backgrounds, different religion, but just coming together and focusing on the arts, focusing on, gender equality, these kind of things. And this is exactly what we have with it's called ECF Children's Fund. We were told to change the name from Ethiopian Children's Fund to ECF Children's Fund. So ECF Children's Fund is located in Aliltu, celebrating 25 years next year. And so we have 1,600 students who've gone through our program.
Wow.
And we have students that have graduated, who've gone into medical school, engineering. They've won scholarships. We're maybe one of the top performing schools in that particular area. And one of the best things that we have done is that we made sure, because I was living in New York at that time, that the community was very much part of what we were doing. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to come, we know better, we're going to build a school. No, it was, we're coming here, we're going to work together. So we need you as much as, you know, the other people that we're going to bring. So the community was very much integrated in our project from day one. And the second thing is we made sure that we were going to start becoming more sustainable. So we made sure we were growing our own crops. We have a dairy farm. So we wanted to be independent, you know, not 100% sustainable, we're still not, because we don't have enough land to feed everybody. It's been, you know, one of the most incredible things for me.
It's not a boarding school, right?
It's not a boarding school, but they're children who are really those who need the most help. Those who need the most help, they're the children from a very, very, you know, we take them from ages 4 and 6, and they start with kindergarten, and then as they grow, we take in more and more students. Okay. So what we've had is we have students who are, we only take up to maximum 40 students per class, and then we, you know, as they grow, we take new students. So now we have, you know, the first batch graduated in 2012 or something, because we started in 1999, and you know, so today 20% of our teachers at ECF are former students. Wow. How cool is that?
That is very cool.
So 20% came back, and some of them are engineers, some of them are, you know, they've studied different things, but they came back, and because we were so integrated with the community, they, you know, we didn't isolate the students and say, you and then the community, you know, we were very much part of the community, doing all sorts of different, even now during COVID, we had 70 volunteers of our 70 volunteer students who, during the year and a half during COVID, we were providing food for 1,000 families from crops that we had. We raised funds. Agence France de Développement, AFD helped us a lot. So we raised money and we bought blankets, and you know, especially for women who can't go out of their house. So our volunteers were washing their clothes. So because we're very much close with the community as one, you know. And the other thing that I find that we have that has really helped us to become successful with the school is that we have a very strong arts program. So we have drama, we have music, we have photography, all sorts of different. So the children, when they finish school, they stay on and they're involved in all these activities. So the girls are more confident when they get older, you know, and that's really helped us as well. So pretty much, yeah, I can go on forever about the school.
I know, and
I don't want to take up all your time, but yeah, we've done, you know, quite a bit of things, but it's one of the things that I'm very proud of, and obviously I have an incredible team. At the school, we have 82 staff members. So overall, I mean, it's really, you know, it's really one of the best things I feel, but obviously now, you know, we don't want to stop there. So we want to open up more schools, God willing. You know, just at least use that as a model and try to see how we can, you know, replicate that.
This question goes hand in hand, because I've read somewhere that you've wanted to build a children's village. So how's that going? Have you built your children's village yet? Or is the school the children's village?
Yeah, it is. The school is, sometimes when it's picked, they say village, or it's a school. It's not a boarding school. We deliberately didn't do boarding because we didn't want to isolate the children from the community. So even if they don't have parents, they live with their guardians, like uncle or grandparent. And so
these children, are they orphans?
We give priority to orphans.
Okay.
Orphans or single, or if they have lost one parent, or if they have nothing. So there's a whole committee. The local authorities help us select. We have our committee from our staff, and we select 40 every year. We have 2 programs. We have in Oromia and we have in Amharic. So we have 2 programs that we run parallel. So they choose which program they want to, but they have like sports together. They have, you know, lunch and activities and everything together. Yeah, so it's the children. We have it's 37 acres of land, so it's quite big. We have our own water well, and we supply water to the most of the community, because when there's problems with the water in the community, they come and get from us. So yeah, we've been there 24 years now. So it's my second family. I know it so well. I know before the road was built, it used to take me 2 hours coming in from New York, and there was no direct flight. So I would go to London, from London, another flight. I'll arrive, I'll be so excited to go. I would literally go to Ireland to that. Take me 2 hours to get there, and then 2 hours coming back. And then I would go 3 days later. So because just to see other progress, just to see how things were going.
So now let's come to African mosaic. And if you could tell us the story behind the birth of African mosaic.